Welcome to Rosie the Reviewer. We're your hosts. I'm Sam,
And I'm Marcia.
and we like World War II media, and we want to talk about it. Welcome back to Rosie the Reviewer. This week we're talking about the film The Land Girls, which came out in 1998. It was directed by David Leland and written by Keith Dewhurst. And coincidentally or not, David Leland directed Bastogne, which is episode 6 of Band of Brothers. So fun for us. The movie's based on the 1995 novel Land Girls by Angela Huth, and it tells the story of 3 fictional women who join the Women's Land Army to help out on a farm in rural Britain during World War II. What did you think of this movie?
Meh. I thought it was kind of meh. I didn't hate it. I kind of enjoyed it, but I didn't think it was particularly good. I do think it's a very 90s movie. I feel like maybe 20-year-old me would have really enjoyed this one. 38-year-old me is a little bit more jaded and cynical, so I'm like, why are these girls being so stupid? But I did enjoy seeing some Land Girls, which we've not talked about before, and I thought the women had good character and the dialogue was fine and the acting was okay. I don't know, I didn't care too much for the plot. How about you?
It's funny because I also was going to say that it felt super 90s to me. There's just this fluffy romantic quality that seemed to get imbued in all these movies in the 90s, regardless of what era that they were supposed to be about. But yeah, I read the book first, and for the first maybe third of the book, I was like, nah, this is not really my vibe. And then it grew on me a little bit. I'm not super into romances typically, but the way the book pans out, these 3 women definitely make choices for themselves and they have some agency. And so I liked that a little bit. It had these beautiful descriptions of the English countryside, and I thought the characters were fairly well developed. I felt that was a little bit of a weaker point in the movie. The characters were a little harder to tell apart. Obviously, Rachel Weisz is super charming in anything that she does, so it was nice to see her. But yeah, they also made a couple of changes for the movie, some of them that I thought were good and some of them that I liked a little bit less, so we'll definitely talk about those. Broadly speaking, not super my jam. I don't think it's a bad movie. I think if you like these sort of fluffy period pieces, you'll probably vibe with it.
Strange. I do like fluffy period pieces. I just think that my idea of romance has changed a lot in maybe the past 10 years. So I didn't find any of this particularly romantic. It was just kind of like, girl, what are you doing? You're not making good choices for you or the guy or the other women who are there. And it's just really kind of confusing for me why I didn't like it that much. But that's fine.
I find myself saying, girl, what are you doing in so many of these movies.
Yeah, I feel like we should develop a Rosie t-shirt that just says, girl, what are you doing?
Yeah, definitely.
Do you want to get into the plot?
Sure. Maybe I'll start by reading a passage from the book. Like I said, they have these really nice descriptions of the English countryside.
Go on. Set the scene for us, Sam.
Yeah. So this is about a character named Ratty. You see him only super briefly in the movie. He's the farmhand, like the older guy, but he's a little bit of a bigger character in the book. He gets his own subplot. And so this is from his perspective. The winter sky was heavy on Ratty's head. His temples throbbed, his arthritic hip ached. He needed shade, shelter from the cruel glare of the heavens. He turned into long wood that ran half a mile beside fields, then straggled on up the hill. In the path between the trees, he found some relief. The purplish light that clings to winter branches and the myriad shadows scattered finely as broken glass confused his eyes in an agreeable way. He was in no mood to see things clearly. The muffling of his own footsteps was a blessing, too. Here, the only sound was an occasional soft snapping of twigs, mushy from rain, breaking underfoot. No birds sang. Then the aeroplane from nowhere, ripped from the bowels of silence, it screamed invisibly overhead. Interrupted in their winter husbandry, birds rattled out of the undergrowth, calling in alarm, and fled to high branches that trembled in the wake of the monster. Ratty peered up. Was it ours? Theirs? It had gone too fast for him to see. Knees trembling, he moved off again more slowly. After a while, the wood returned to its old quiet.
I do enjoy that. That sounds really, pretty.
The book is well written, I would say, and there was definitely a few words that I had to look up, which doesn't happen to me very often when I'm reading in English, so
Interesting. Imagine how many I would have had to look up. Probably a
They
couple
were all
more.
great words. I was like, "I gotta make a note of these so I can use them in a sentence."
Have you done it?
No, of course not, but I thought it.
With the scene set, I think we should get into the plot. Farmer John Lawrence, played by Tom Georgeson, picks up three women at the train station and takes them to his farm, where they will be helping out on the land since many of the able-bodied young men are off to war. Women are Prue, played by Anna Friel, who's a hairdresser, Egg, played by Rachel Wise, who's a college graduate, and Stella, played by Catherine McCormack, who provides the voiceover and is engaged to a naval officer.
The Women's Land Army, which had existed during World War I, was reformed again for World War II in June of 1939. And over the next 11 years, which you'll notice includes the post-war period, the Women's Land Army employed over 200,000 women to replace the farm labor of men who had not only gone to war, but men who perhaps had not come back or who were delayed in demobilizing. Per the Women's Land Army website, despite having little to no agricultural experience, they plowed, grew produce, milked cows, caught rats, drove tractors, and much more. And when I read into this a little bit more, because we do see these women in the book doing these tasks, and we know that they got some rudimentary training on them, although a lot of the stuff that they learned was on the fly. Some women even worked in land reclamation. So this would be like draining a bog to make it suitable for farmland type of thing. Or in this little subsection of the WLA known as the Timber Corps. And these women were called lumberjills, which I quite enjoyed. There are some great photos online of women cutting trees together in their sort of 1940s flannel. I loved it. And by May of 1941, all British women aged 19 to 40 had to register for war work of some description. So that's why a lot of women ended up funneled into the WLA. You know, obviously there were a lot of women who had experience working on farms, but it was kind of an adventure if you were a city girl, for example. And farming was especially crucial due to the German attempts to blockade Britain from receiving supplies, as we talked about a little bit in our Battle of the River Plate episode.
I just put into the notes, there's dang pocket battleships, huh?
That's right, those dang pocket battleships and those dang U-boats.
It's funny that you should say it felt like an adventure to some of these girls, because that's sort of the conversation that the three girls have. They are all very excited to be going to the countryside. Although, you can tell that they are city girls, but not to the extent I would have liked. I would have liked to have seen a little bit more transition. I feel like they kind of take like fish to water at this farm, and I wonder if that was what it would have been like in real life.
See, I kind of liked that they did that because I was a little worried when I read the book that they were gonna make these women really, like, squeamish about farm work, and they weren't really. Like, there were some aspects definitely in the book, the character Egg really hates the rat hunting, she really doesn't like rats, but for the most part, the women are like, "Well, better get on with it, I'm here to do a job." The land girls, as they're colloquially called, meet Farmer John's wife. Her name is Faith. I don't know if they ever say that in the movie. I think the women just call her Mrs. Lawrence, but her name is Faith, and she's played by Maureen O'Brien. And they meet her over a somewhat awkward introductory dinner. They're in a little dark farmhouse. Obviously, the women are feeling a little out of place, and they've had a long day of traveling. John is obviously not sold on the idea of having women working on the farm. The couple mentioned that they have a son, Joe, who we don't meet just yet, but he will be played by Stephen McIntosh, who also helps out on the farm, but he has plans to join the RAF soon as a pilot, and so he won't be around, and that's why they need help from these women.
I enjoyed that Faith and John have this conversation about John being kind of unkind to them and he's moody, and she's like, well, this was your idea. This made me laugh.
Yes.
The women get settled in a little attic bedroom that they all share together. It's tiny and cozy. And that night there's a bombing in nearby Southampton, and the women go to watch it on the horizon. Stella confides that her fiance Philip, played by a very young Paul Bettany, one of his first roles, I think, is stationed there. And they also see someone on a motorbike, and I think it's Prue who says it might be an Italian POW, because they also were working on farms. So it wouldn't have been weird for it to be a POW. But we'll meet him later.
Yeah, one of the things that I liked in the book and the movie is that for the most part, you do get the sense that this farm is, for as much as it's hard work, it's also kind of idyllic. They're quite isolated from the war. They're obviously out in the countryside, and so they're not terribly worried about being bombed. And it's kind of a false sense of security, as we'll see later in the movie. But this movie does show us all this really lovely landscape and that kind of stuff. And it does feel very sort of remote from everything.
Remote from the war too. I thought the war was really, really in the background until much, much later. I don't know if I mind. I might have enjoyed getting a little bit more urgency about the whole thing. But maybe that's what you just said. It does feel a little bit idyllic and they're far away and it doesn't feel that dangerous yet.
Another thing I liked is the Stella and Philip relationship is one of those ones where I think happened to a lot of people during the war where there was this sense of urgency. And so people would agree to get married to people they didn't know very well. And in this case, Stella spends the first chunk of the movie and certainly the first chunk of the book being very dreamy and kind of distracted by these thoughts of her fiance, Philip. And she's built up this idea of him in her mind that is not necessarily corresponding to reality. And then as we'll find out later, the shine comes off the rose a little bit.
Yeah, I do feel a little bit bad for Philip, to be very honest with you. But still, like, these women are the heroines of the story, so they should get it all. Spoiler alert, they do not.
No, they do not. The women meet Joe, Mr. and Mrs. Lawrence's son, the next morning and begin learning the ropes around the farm. Joe likes to tease them, particularly Stella. Prue makes up her mind that she's going to sleep with him. He's a young man, he's their age. She sets her sights on him and she shoots her shot by walking astride this tall beam in the barn and then tumbling off so that Joe can come to her rescue.
So annoying!
Egg and Stella have to cover for her when the Lawrences come looking for their son, and obviously he's having a little tumble in the hay with one of the land girls.
Literally, yes. I do like when Mrs. Lawrence sees him half undressed getting out of the barn and is like looking at him knowingly, yet doesn't say anything.
Yes. And one thing I liked about Prue, and you get a lot more of it in the book than the movie, is that she's so fun. Like, she really wants to, she's going to sleep with Joe. She is under no illusions about the fact that they're not going to get married. They're not going to have a forever relationship. She just wants to bang him a few times and live while they're young type thing. And she does that quite a bit more in the book. She goes through a whole string of guys around the village and from the nearby RAF base. And I just get a kick out of her because so often in these stories that are about women in period pieces, they're always like, I saw this guy and I fell in love with him immediately and that was it. And Prue's just not like that. She's just here to have a good time.
I just found all of them annoying.
Well, maybe I liked them more because I read the book first, and you definitely get a lot more about their inner lives, of course.
Yeah, I can see that. John is facing much outside pressure from the government to turn more of his pasture land into cropland for the war effort, which would mean giving up most of his livestock. He does not like it. He's really firmly against it, and we see just how much the meadows mean to him. He's like, look at this land, it's beautiful. Meanwhile, the women are in for a surprise when they find out that Joe is in fact engaged to a woman named Janet by Lucy Ackhurst. Prue doesn't really care about this at all. She just creeps down into his bed at night and they have a little tumble again. And he's like, well, I'm engaged. And she's like, oh, well, what's this then? When he's obviously got an erection. It is really funny.
Yes. One of the changes that they made from the book to the movie that I liked was that book Janet is the worst. Like, you can just tell that we're not supposed to sympathize with her. She's very staid and uptight and boring, and Joe doesn't even really seem to like her that much. He got engaged to her because she was some local girl and he thought that's what his parents wanted. And she came across as someone a little bit more, someone who has her own life and isn't so obsessed with Joe in the movie, which, made her a little less pathetic, I think. And there's another female character in the Ratty subplot that I mentioned up top that we don't see in the movie at all. And that's Ratty's wife, Edith. And they don't have a happy marriage. She's always on his ass. And then at the end of the book, she goes to insane asylum, and then Ratty just gets to live out the rest of his life in peace from his nagging wife, and I'm like, "My god, you can write characters, like female characters that are, spiteful or boring or whatever, but they shouldn't be punished by the narrative." I don't know. I just found that the female characters that we weren't supposed to sympathize with were not treated very well in the book, and I liked that there was much less of that in the film.
Yeah, and I guess what I never like in books either is when the guy falls in love with someone else, it's because his own wife is not nice. He can just also fall in love with someone else and she can still be a nice, like, a normal person. She doesn't have to be horrible.
Right, like, you don't have to justify his cheating to me. He can still be an interesting character even if he's not doing the right thing.
Exactly, and he can still just fall in love with someone else even if his wife is, or just
Yes.
sometimes that just happens.
Yeah, this thing where John is getting all this pressure from the government to change his pasture land into cropland is also somewhat in the book, but there's also another conflict where John has a brother who lives up north who is terminally ill, and they're basically waiting for him to die because when that happens, Mr. and Mrs. Lawrence are going to have to go up and take over his farm and they're going to have to sell this farm. And they've lived on it for so long that that's really difficult for them. And, there's just some parts of the book where you feel really tender towards these people because they're simple people, they're used to farming in this area, and they know that there's no need to be attached to the land, but they are anyway. And we don't really get that in the movie as much. Obviously, we know that John likes how beautiful the meadow is and that kind of stuff. But yeah, just a little subplot that didn't make it into the movie, I don't think.
I wonder if that would have helped me a little bit with John, because there's no explanation as to this grumpy man feels so emotional about a bit of land. I think he's an interesting character. I wasn't sure what they were trying to do with him in the movie, because obviously his wife is really nice, and he's just really grumpy and moody and sort of strange in the beginning. And then later up, he does grow up a bit. But I didn't really understand him too much in the movie.
Yeah. I mean, I guess that's just always the problem with an adaptation. You just don't necessarily have enough time to sketch all of the characters out with the depth that they deserve.
Yeah. Stella waits for the mill each morning, anxiously awaiting news from Philip. She wants to go and see him while he's on leave, but John, our farmer, refuses her. After a row with Joe puts him out of sorts.
Yeah, Joe is in the movie, he kinda acts like a teenager, like, he's supposed to enlist in the RAF, but he hasn't done it yet, and it's a point of contention between him and John. In the book, you understand Joe's motivations a little bit better because he has asthma, so he knows straight off the bat that he can't enlist, and he decides that he's going to apply to, I believe it's Cambridge, it's one of those fancy schools, then because of the war and because his parents need so much help on the farm because they did have other farm hands who had enlisted and are gone now. He's not able to go to college, and so he does have a little bit of bitterness, but he tries not to let it take over him. And again, I think he's just a bit more sympathetic in the book because of that than he is in the movie.
Yeah, we talked a little bit about this before this recording when I was watching the movie. I was like, why is everybody into Joe? I just didn't get it. I just find him really annoying and whiny. I'm like, why is he so moody? What's wrong with him? But apparently in the book he does have some motivations that make it make sense.
Yeah, and his teasing is a little less, not that he's mean in the movie, but he's a lot more sympathetic to his parents and he's kinder more broadly, I think. And this is just me being nitpicky, but in the book they describe him as this kind of big guy who would work on a farm. And in the movie they've cast this little gangly man, and I'm like, that guy doesn't work on a farm.
Apparently, the actor was set to become the big, like, rom-com guy in the 90s, and I just don't see it. Maybe I'm too old at this point. Maybe I can no longer be a good judge of who's, like, leading man material. I just
Yeah.
can't see it. I'm sorry. I mean, he's fun as an actor. I just don't find him particularly appealing, like, in any way.
Yeah, I do think he's more the vibe of the kind of guys that we all thought were love interests in the '90s, you know? A little bit of a sopping wet man.
Yeah. It's just my interests have changed. That I'm sure that's it.
You should have seen it in your Pearl Harbor era.
Yes, exactly. That would have made all the sense. Anyway,
There is a parade in which the local land girls march alongside soldiers in the town, and they see a Spitfire flying overhead that has been funded by local donations. It's very this makes it all worth it. It's a very patriotic little moment that I think would probably annoy me more if it was an American film versus a British film. But anyway, Prue spots a handsome airman in the crowd by the name of Barry. His name is Nick Molo, and we'll definitely see more of him.
I did enjoy the Spitfire, as always. It's so pretty, man. It's one of the most elegant planes I've ever seen, and I just feel like I need to say it. I've never talked so fondly about Spitfires on this podcast before. This also made the rest of the film kind of worth it. I was like, ah, there's planes in this. This is fun.
Yeah, we see it flying over a few times. Spitfire funds were created to facilitate the desire of the British public to contribute financially to the war effort. So, what the government did was they priced Spitfires at a theoretical £5,000, and then funds were set up by various municipalities and businesses and organizations and groups to try and get donations to try and purchase their own Spitfire, purchase quote unquote. By the end of the war, the funds had raised £13 million, which is £650 million in today's funds. So that's quite a sum of money, or enough for approximately 2,600 Spitfires.
Imagine being able to just fund the Spitfire today. I would totally do it.
Yeah, it was one of those ways to make people feel like they were really involved.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder how far away they felt in Britain. I don't know. I can't tell if I wasn't there.
I also think it'd be quite different. They're in Dorset, of course, in this film, and obviously it would be quite different if you lived in London or Coventry or one of the
Yes,
places being bombed.
yeah, for sure. This is the rural, far away from the war. Well, they do see bombing, obviously, but even that happens in the distance. Joe chauffeurs the three women to a dance that night, and this made me laugh because when they arrive, they kind of pawn their coats off on Joe, and they're like, here, take these, and then they take off to the dance. And Prue dances with Barry, her airman, and Egg is immediately taken by a Canadian airman named Desmond, played by Michael Mantas. Joe gets himself smacked in the fight over a girl, and he's bleeding a bit. So Stella initially comforts him, but she then realizes that it's his own behavior that has brought this on. So she's like, you're just silly and stupid. But at the same dance, it is announced to the crowd that the Japanese have bombed Pearl Harbor, which for a second seems a little bit sad. And then she says, but America has ended the war on our side. And everybody cheers, which is so weird to me. To say America got bombed. Woohoo!
Yeah, but I guess in Britain at this time in late 1941, they probably felt like they had their back up against the wall a little bit. The last free
Yep,
country standing against fascism type of thing.
yep. The rest
Yeah,
was all, I guess, occupied by now.
yeah. In the book, Desmond never actually makes a physical appearance. He's a guy that Egg knew at college, and they had hung out in a group several times. He was kind of like a friend of a friend, and she had this far off crush on him. And she thinks about him all the time, and she's determined she's going to be with Desmond. And if she can't be with Desmond, she's going to be alone. But you really have no sense of whether or not Desmond feels the same way about her because they don't even correspond. And so late in the book, she decides that's it. She's going to send him a Christmas card. So she sends him a Christmas card. He sends one back. And then she's like, okay, I'm going to send him a letter now. So she writes him this 17-page letter about life on the farm, etc. And she decides if I don't hear back from him in 2 weeks, then I'm not going to. And I'm just going to be alone forever. I've decided. And she doesn't hear back from him. And it's not until right at the end that we find out that Desmond had been sent to fight. And so that's why he never received the 17-page letter. And so ultimately they do get together. But there's very much not this thing in the book where she meets this guy and she's like, I'll wait for you, you know?
Is he Canadian in the book?
No,
Shame. I do like a Canada mention.
that's right. I also like a Canada mention.
I said to you as I was watching, why are all these men so meh?
I know. You're like, I don't even know. We see 2 seconds of conversation between Egg and Desmond. I don't understand what they like about each other, but I guess it's that thing, right? You've had a couple drinks, you're at a dance with this dashing pilot, and you're like, oh my God, he could die. So you just, I don't know, maybe that's prompts feelings that you wouldn't ordinarily have.
It's so weird to me that after this, Rachel Weisz went on to do The Mummy, and she's so much better in The Mummy. And it's just such a, like, she's so tiny in this still, and her acting is kind of clunky, but maybe it's the character.
Yeah, I don't know that the writing is like incredible.
Maybe it's that too.
The women get back late from the dance. Stella decides that she's going to plow Mr. Lawrence's meadows, whether he likes it or not. Remember that she's still a little bit mad at him because he wouldn't let her go and see Philip. And when she gets back inside, she discovers that Mrs. Lawrence is ill and puts her to bed, taking over her chores for the day. And Mrs. Lawrence is one of these people who she'll fight through the worst illness to do her stuff. She's not going to complain. And so it's pretty rare for her to take a day off. And this softens up Mr. Lawrence, who both respects Stella's gumption for plowing the fields and appreciates her looking after his wife. And he allows Stella the time off to go and see Philip.
I will say she looked rather badass sitting on that giant plow machine. Plow?
Yes, it
Just
really
plow.
it really cracked me up, her sitting in the middle of this half-plowed field and Mr. Lawrence is just stalking towards her. You're like, "Ooh, they're gonna have words."
I do like that he takes a dog with him wherever he goes.
Yeah.
Oh, still putting off a listing, takes Stella to the station on his motorbike. So the guy that they saw in the dark wasn't actually a POW, but turned out to be Joe on his motorbike.
Wait, and you gotta mention the fact that he could have taken her in the car, but he takes her on the motorbike to kinda be an asshole because he knows she's gonna get splattered in mud.
And he also knows, I feel like he knows that she likes him a little. Like, all the girls like Joe. They're all just a bit taken with him. And he knows, and he takes advantage. But when Joe returns home, Prue has brought an egg into suggesting to Joe that they have a little go of themselves. I think she even says, I want you to have a go at me, which I thought was funny. Because Egg doesn't want to be clumsy when she eventually will see Desmond again. But Joe initially is like, oh, who do you take me for? And then he later shows up in her room and says he's changed his mind, and they have a go at it.
This part really made me laugh because it's so in character for her to be like, "I'm gonna fuck this guy I don't even like so that I don't have to look awkward and inexperienced when I sleep with the guy that I actually like." And so she's taking off her clothes and she's telling Joe all of this information that she finds pertinent for him to know. She's like, "My father is a solicitor and I'm going to be a barrister." It's kind of cute and kind of funny.
And she also tells him her real name is not Agatha, but some other weird name I can't remember.
Her real name is Agapanthus.
What a name! That's great.
Yes, it's it's very funny. That's you can tell that she comes from a fairly well-bred family because it's a name from I don't remember exactly what. It's like a myth or a story or something, but she's like, "Yeah, my dad chose this name, but then we all agreed that it was a crazy name to go by, so I just go by Egg." Stella lies to Philip when she meets up with him in Southampton, where he's stationed because he's a naval officer. She tells him that it's that time of the month and Philip doesn't want to ride the Crimson Tide, so they don't sleep together. And they spend a bit of an awkward weekend, all told. Not that she mentions that to Joe when he picks her up again at the train station. She's like,
Feel bad. I like Philip. Just should have been honest with him. I was like, oh, what are you doing?
yeah, it's funny because in the book, that doesn't happen. They definitely smash several times. But I don't know. This movie's funny to me because they're like, Stella has to wait for her true love. Like, I don't understand why they took out the part where she slept with Philip, unless it's to just demonstrate to us that she doesn't care for him as much as she thought. In the book, you get a whole chapter, I think, on the weekend that they spend. And it's so awkward because Philip books them into this B&B that is run by this super nosy woman who is all concerned about the fact that they're not married and she's all up in their business. And so the second night he takes her to a hotel, which is what she wanted in the first place. And he's like, "Yeah, I booked us into the B&B because you wanted a hotel and I wanted to show you that I was in charge. But now I feel bad about it because the B&B kind of sucked." And she's like, "Well, there's nothing terribly wrong with Philip as a person. He's just not a great fit for Stella." I feel like you get a better sense of that in the book.
Guess I feel for Philip a bit because he's played by Paul Bettany, and I like Paul Bettany, and that's the problem.
Yes.
But I will say, Paul Bettany in this movie, I had to like do a double take because he's so young. It's like, wait, is that Paul Bettany? And yes, it is.
Well, I knew he was gonna be in this movie because the friend who recommended this to me, she was like, "Have you seen The Land Girls? It has young Paul Bettany." That was the point of recommendation.
All right. I mean, she's not wrong, but it also, like, to me, the first name I saw was Rachel Weisz, and obviously we've seen her in another World War II film. That's interesting. also. But, yeah, I don't know, I just felt bad for Philip a bit. They have this conversation where he says that he imagines their life together after the war, which, tie a ribbon on that.
Yeah.
Christmas! Derry and Prue are engaged, but Stella must content herself with a stilted phone conversation with Philip. It's all very sad. Barry and Prue are soon married, and I thought that's so cute.
This is wild to me because Book Prue would never marry Barry. Book Prue's whole thing is that she wants to sleep with all these handsome soldiers and airmen and farm hands and whoever she can get her hands on, but she's got her sights set on a rich man who can buy her a house with fancy chandeliers and golden taps and all of
Oh,
these ideal dreams that she has. So she does not marry Barry in the book. And in fact, she ends up dating the guy who comes to tell her about what happens to Barry after. So she's not even with Barry anymore when not long after Barry is killed when his plane goes down in the English Channel. So that does happen in the
no.
book that Barry is killed, but he's not still with Prue. And she's obviously devastated in the book in the same way that she is in the movie, but she's also like, well, it's probably a good thing I didn't write him that letter telling him I didn't want to date him anymore.
I wonder if all the changes that were made from the book were in part made because it was made in the 90s and women, I guess, weren't allowed to be as progressive yet as they are today. I mean, it feels like they're trying to make them a little more proper than they are in the book, maybe.
Yeah. It just felt really like stereotypical that
Yeah.
Prue, this wild girl, gets tamed by this guy and then he dies and it's all very sad, etc.
Mm.
And so in the movie, Prue's very upset about this and it inspires Stella to tell Joe that she loves him. And he, being a man, decides now is a good time to run off to enlist in the RAF like he's been putting off doing.
Running away from this feeling.
I kind of thought that because he was putting off enlisting in the movie, I thought they were going to do a thing where it's like he had already tried to enlist and found out that he couldn't, but he didn't want to tell anyone. And I was like, ooh, this will be some good intrigue. And then that was not what they did.
Unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, Joe's unfit for service because he has a hereditary heart murmur, just like his mother. And he's like, I'm just horrible and I can't do it. He flings himself off the barn for a couple times. And I thought at first, before I realized what was actually going on, I thought he was trying to hurt himself so he didn't have to go to war. I thought he was being a coward, but it wasn't that.
No, he was just being emotional and flinging himself off the barn because he was sad that he couldn't go to war.
That's so funny because I thought the entire movie he was being a coward that didn't want to go to war.
Yeah, and I think Book Joe just has a better head on his shoulders. He's kind of resigned himself to this life on the farm, marrying Janet, none of which is what he really wants, but he's always understood that that would be what he would have to do, especially, with his parents having to move north and take over this other farm. He's just aware of the shape that his life is going to take, and he doesn't seem to be able to figure out a way out of it, so he just lets it happen.
Yeah, I don't vibe with movie Joe at all myself.
A German plane crashes in the Lawrence's fields. Joe thinks for a moment that Stella might have been killed in the explosion, and they embrace and decide that they want to be together no matter what. Stella vows that she will tell Philip that she's breaking off the engagement the next time she can get up to Southampton. She's like, oh, it's not really the kind of thing you can put in a letter, which is kind of her. But also, as we will find out, she probably should have done that shit right away.
The way I'm rolling my eyes, just in general, at this whole relationship, I don't feel any of it. I just don't. Like, it's supposed to be romantic and they're supposed to be very in love with each other, but I don't know if it's just because every single main character who's a woman in this movie has slept with Joe and has shown an interest in Joe, and he's also shown an interest back. It to me kind of felt a little bit like Stella was the last person he hadn't slept with yet, and then suddenly, oh shit, he's in love with her, but I don't know if that's the movie or if that's me.
I think it's clearer in the book that he and Prue are not romantically interested in each other. They just want to fuck. And I also think it's clearer that when he and Egg sleep together, he's kind of doing her a favor.
Mm.
And so when he finally figures out that he's in love with Stella, this whole time she didn't even cross his radar, really. I mean, obviously, you didn't get that sense from the movie, so they probably didn't do a good enough job of making us buy into that relationship.
No, it's probably a movie thing then. Stella receives an unexpected and very unpleasant phone call because Philip has been wounded. And we don't quite know how bad it is, but as you can tell from just any sort of movie, you just know that this is gonna be bad. So she arrives at the hospital and it's a little bit worse than she's feared because he's lost both of his legs below the knee. And he says as he's in the hospital bed, he tells her, I was imagining it, our future, I was imagining it, and now he just can't, and it's sad. Knowing that she can't leave him now, she does not return to the farm despite her promise to Joe. And he waits at the train station for her, much in the same way they did the same shot as they did with his dad coming to pick up the girls. And he waits for the train, and the train goes into the station and it stops. And you see the train in the shop, but you can't see who's behind it. And then the train drives away, and she's not there. And it's so sad. And you also immediately know that she's not coming back.
Yeah, I just think they were both a bit more mature about it in the book. Stella is like, Philip lost his legs below the knee, and Joe is like, okay, well, you can't bail on him.
Mm.
And they both acknowledge it together that it's never going to work out between them despite their hopes.
I like that better. That's so much more real life than just not speaking again.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of like, despite true love, sometimes real life gets in the way.
It's almost a little bit more like the movie For the Moment, which we did an episode on as well, if you want to go listen to that. Where Russell Crowe's a pilot and he's taking flying lessons in the town of Minnesota. And he has a romance, but they both know that it's not going to work and they're very mature about it. And that's more romantic to me than what happens here, where they just don't talk about it.
Yeah, definitely. After the war, we pick up with the characters at Prue's baby's christening. She is now married to this rich older man, and she's named the baby after Barry, but it's definitely a few years later, so it can't be Barry's baby. John Lawrence has died by this time, and Egg has married Desmond. Stella is in the process of getting divorced from Philip. Just didn't work out. She does not mention this when she speaks to Joe, who is now married to Janet. And in voiceover, Stella says that regardless of all they've lost, there is always hope.
And Joe does tell her that he's waited for her at the train station for like a week every day since that day she didn't come back. Which I thought was kind of sad.
Yes, and he says, I'm still waiting, and
Exactly, I'm still waiting. It's so dramatic.
yeah. The way the book is framed is that at the beginning and the end, we get the 3 land girls meeting up for dinner, and it's decades later. They're older women now, and Stella isn't able to come because she's unwell. Then we find out that Stella has been married to Philip until his death. He died like 10 years previous, and the whole time she was married to him, she was sleeping with Joe, and one of her kids is probably Joe's.
Man, these changes. Again, probably 10 years ago, 15 years ago, I would have thought Joe and Stella were meant to be and very romantic. Now I'm just rolling my eyes at these characters. I'm so sorry.
Stella is more selfless than me, man, because if I'd gotten to that hospital, I would have been like, "Sorry about your legs, bro. I met someone else."
In the movie, Stella at some point says to, I think one of the girls, I can't remember who, she is talking about Philip and she says he's hardly a man. And I thought, wait, is she saying that because he has no legs or because he's sleeping around? And well, to be honest, I said because he ran off and you reminded me that he reeled off.
Yes, he doesn't have any legs. He didn't run off.
And we can say this because I'm disabled, so we get a pass.
Yes, yes. I wouldn't have said that if I thought you were sensitive about it.
No, I'm not. I find it hilarious, in fact. But anyway, yeah, like, I feel bad for Philip. I'm sorry. Can't help it. In the movie, I feel bad for Philip. Just have been honest, man.
Yeah. And the doubly shitty part is that he didn't even get wounded in battle. He was on leave in London and he just wrong place, wrong time, and he got caught in a bombing.
No, that's so sad.
I know. So, yeah, unfortunate for Philip that he doesn't get his happily ever after with Stella, I suppose.
They just should have been honest with each other. Then you would have been alone, but at least you wouldn't have been in this relationship that doesn't work.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, tell me some more about the WLA, please.
Yeah. Disappointing little coda is that the woman who had reformed and led the Women's Land Army throughout the war, Lady Denman, resigned as director in February of 1945 when the decision was made to exclude land girls from post war financial benefits that were offered to other women's services, as well as the men's services, of course. And so, even though they had effectively kept the country fed, or at least played a major part in it during the war, they were not viewed as a military service, and so they didn't get those post-war veterans benefits that other people got.
And here I am still thinking that they probably would have lost their war if they hadn't had the land girls.
Yeah, I mean, especially during the Battle of the Atlantic, right? Like, they were
Yep.
losing literally millions of tons of shipping every year to the German U-boats, and if they hadn't been able to, funnel these women into working the land, they would have had a really hard time feeding their population and the army.
Yes. I have one tiny additional note about the women of the WLA because they went unrecognized for a very long time, not receiving a commemorative veterans badge until July of 2008. So that's after this movie came out, when only about 35,000 of all those women were still alive. So many of them never got recognized for what they did during the war. Which makes me sad, man. It's like, come on.
Yeah, it's a bummer for sure. I guess there's no glory in milking cows and plowing fields.
I guess not. And that's the end of the movie and also the end of our movie notes. So, I guess we have to rate this movie, but before we do, I'd like to remind you that you can follow us wherever you get your podcast and rate us 5 stars, or you can send this episode to your friend.
Every time you send this episode to a friend, a land girl gets the recognition she deserves.
Woohoo! Damn straight. What should we rate this movie out of, Sam? I did say something yesterday, but we haven't mentioned this weird thing in the plot lines. So,
Well, on the farm, when there's not grass for the cows to eat, seasonally, they feed them this root vegetable called mangolds. And Mr. Lawrence has a funny little scene at Christmas dinner where he's showing them that you can't throw the mangold because then it will get destroyed and it'll spread mold and all kinds of stuff. So you have to gently place the mangold down. So we could definitely rate this carefully held mangolds out of 10.
I totally thought it was mangoes.
Britain, the famous grower of mangoes.
Alright, we will rate this movie carefully held mangolds out of 10. You go first, Sam, please.
I'm going to rate this movie 5 carefully held mangolds out of 10. It's just not really my vibe. If you normally listen to our podcast and you like the movies that I like, this probably won't be your vibe either. I did think that the Women's Land Army was super interesting and I liked finding out about it. And I also liked all the little details, particularly in the book, about the countryside and what it was like working on a farm in that era. I'm always really into knowing the parts of history that I maybe haven't touched on before. So I did like that. I liked that it was a movie fronted by women. Obviously, when we watch war movies, we don't get tons of those. I think our movie last week had like 2 speaking female characters in it. So it was nice to follow these 3 women who, were just living their lives and were thrown into this war and decided that they were going to pitch in. But yeah, I don't think it's a super strong film. I think you can probably give it a miss. What about you?
I will rate this movie also 5 carefully held mangolds out of 10. Normally, this kind of movie would be a little bit my vibe. This wasn't it for me. I think it was very 90s. It was very slice of life, but not in a super interesting way. Not a whole lot happened. A lot of it was focused on relationships that weren't meaningful to me, so didn't love it too much. But like you said, interesting to learn about the WLA for sure. I wish we'd seen maybe a little bit more of that or even some of the struggles, like give it some stakes maybe with someone going off to war that we know that's hungry or something, something like that to give this ladies some connection to the food that they're producing or something. I don't know. But, yeah, not my vibe either, which is weird, but, can't win 'em all, I guess.
Yeah,
Are you reading anything?
I am.
Tell me, tell me!
I am reading The Boat, or Das Boot, as it is better known, by Lothar Gunther Buchheim. And it's a novel, but a novel in the sense that Buchheim served on a submarine during World War II for the Germans. And so the book is based on real things that happened to him and real anecdotes that he heard. So the characters are fictional, but the events are broadly real.
Shall I tell you something? Boat in German is just pronounced boat.
Oh, really?
Yes, so you don't have to try to pronounce it any differently. It's
Well, we'll probably cover the movie anyway, so I'll have lots more opportunities to say it correctly.
and eventually we might also cover the TV show that followed much later. But it's long, it's like 4 seasons, so not yet. Thank you for listening to yet another episode of Rosie the Reviewer. You can follow us wherever you get your podcasts and rate us 5 stars. You can send this episode to a friend. You can follow us on Instagram at Rosie the Reviewer Podcast, or you can visit our website where you can rate the movie like us, or you can find more information about lots of stuff. So do go visit, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye!